Piotr Strzelczyk i Piotr Pianowski. Sprawozdanie na temat postępów w projekcie TeX Gyre Math, czyli matematyka, składanie znaczy fonty matematyczne w projekcie TeX Gyre. Bogusław, Jackowski and Piotr will report standing for the team of himself and Piotr Strzelczyk and Piotr Pianowski on the progress in TeX Gyre font project.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a great pleasure to be the corolla of the conference, the crown of it. Okay, seriously, the whole state of the art is printed here. This is just a test file for the fonts so far we prepared, and comparison with fonts we didn't do. Actually, TeX Gyre Math project contains also the work on Latin modern fonts as a reference point or basic kernel. And what is actually, how can the project compare to what activity it can be compared? It can be compared to assembling a really large puzzle with very strange and odd tiles that not necessarily fit to the holes. Anyway, we tried to do it. Let's start. Usually this kind of lecture I start with remembering that OTF math fonts are very complex creatures because of some decisions. Somebody decided that one font should contain many fonts because of, I believe that this is a simply wrong idea. That because nowadays systems are not able to handle families of fonts, then somebody decided that mathematical font should contain a lot of strange glyphs, like fracture, Hebrew, Greek, and that's okay, but such card suits, symbols, integral is okay, braces are okay because they appear in mathematics, but I'm not sure what about these suit symbols. Anyway, they have to be there. We try to avoid as possible overloading the font with unnecessary symbols, but anyway, a lot of how to say it, Hans loves to use the word crap. There is a lot of unnecessary things. The first line is Latin modern. Next, the font under preparation in green, and it will appear in green. It's TeX Gyre Bonum, then nearly ready TeX Gyre Pagella, and then TeX Gyre terms. So this is actually the state of the art of our works. TeX Gyre Bonum needs some improvements. And now I would like to say not about the intestinals of the font, but rather about our work on it. I'd like to show certain processes that are involved in producing such a font, and some of them are trivial and some of them are really tough. First, the numbers roughly show the level of difficulty. Preparing the basic alphabet is really simple. I will say more about all of this. A bit more difficult is borrowing alphabets from other fonts, because we are not sure of the sources. Some unexpected situations occur. Fonts are even malformed, but still it's simple. This is fairly difficult, programming symbols, but really pleasant, because you do the work once forever and then you manipulate with some parameters and you get the result. So this is actually our favorite stage of work. There are such strange things like hybrid symbols that are partially manually prepared and partially programmed. I will show an example later. This is for us a nightmare if we have to draw missing symbols manually. An example of such a group of symbols is Hebrew. I have no idea how to express it with formulas. You have to draw it. I looked at many designs. I decided one of them to use one of them, and I had to draw it with using visual font editor. Double stack. This is also, I cannot program it, because as you will see, I try to retain the look and feel of the original font in double stack alphabets. This is not obvious whether this should be. There are, for example, Karel Horak was very unhappy because of such a decision, but I will stick to that. I decided, and I will consequently do it. And finally, never-ending story of adjusting parameters. Each font is controlled by lots of parameters. Computer model with its 60-something parameters is rather trivial. There is more font, more parameters, and they have no obvious meaning. In some cases you have to manipulate and try, and using try and error method to find out how it works. I will say more about it. Okay, so let's go through this all stages again. You have here Latin model, Bonum, Pagella, Termes. These alphabets were already prepared, so we converted, or I don't remember. Perhaps we used conversion. So from type 1 or OTF font, we converted it into meta type 1, and they were ready, practically, because they are tested by us, they are checked by us, we know what is inside, so there is, if there is no bug, it's rather trivial task. It takes some time, a day, say. As I told already, ty wychodzisz?
Jedzie.
No to tak. Borrowing alphabets from other fonts is sometimes tiresome, unexpectedly tiresome. Here you have examples of such borrowed alphabet. In the case of Latin modern, sans serif Greek was prepared actually from sources. So this kind of thing, that there is no one method for obtaining additional scripts. In the case of Latin modern, it was I had to use Knuth sources that turned out to be not suited for sans serif Greek. So some further manipulation were needed in order to have a decent or average, at least, font. But there are worse alphabets. This is fracture. I have no idea what is good fracture, what is bad fracture. And I can only ask people who did it, who traced some fractures to provide the font. And then it turns out that fonts contain loops. They are inconsistent in stems. And so I can correct such a font. Of course, I cannot draw it from scratch, but I can correct it. In the case of fracture for terms, it took quite a lot, cleaning the font. Anyway, it's not difficult. It just takes time. And programming, our favorite part. Usually, most of the work is done by Piotr Strzelczyk with my help, and practically the same programs used in Latin modern Bonum, Pagella and terms. The same programs are able to produce such a variety of simple symbols, seemingly simple. And you can see that they differ. We try to have them, even such simple geometrical symbols, different from font to font. And for example, here we have such a watermark, incision, as you can see, incision at the ends of lines. Of course, it has no influence on the view of the glyphs in print. But if you enlarge it, you can see it, and then we know that it's ours. But this is, as I emphasized, this is done by the same set of modules. From time to time we have to improve something, but then or remove back, but this is still pleasant part of the work. Hybrid symbols. Good example of the hybrid symbols. There are a few in math fonts. Integral and summation and product. Summation is the integral is perhaps most interesting. again, our decision. We wanted to have the integral somehow resembling the long S in italic form. Why? Because integral comes from the Leibniz notation, and he used long S, long italic S for summation, for infinite summation, and this is the origin of integral. So we decided that it makes sense to keep the resemblance of these symbols. And you can see this is not our design, it's Knuthian, Latin modern, and you can see that there is something similar. In Bonum, perhaps the integral is a little bit too thick. We'll tune such details later, but the top of the letter is the same. Here you have here we have the tough problem, because ending, such kind of ending doesn't look nice in integrals. I prefer integrals ended. Fortunately, normal S has such ending, so this is actually hybrid. It's hybrid of long S and normal S. You can see that there is a flat part of this edge, top edge. We try to have it also here. Okay, so the top of the letter was drawn by me in a font editor and tuned visually. Then this piece of code was taken from font and included into a program that makes use of it somehow, enabling the growing character. You can see that this is not normal scaling. Yeah? The top is a little bit larger and the length is significantly larger. And then you can manipulate with these characters like with other characters we have. There are a lot of integrals in math fonts. Still not all unicoded integrals we have, and I'm not sure whether we want to have them. So this is also a time-consuming part because of this visual tuning, because you have to prepare it, include it into the program, then print, look, correct, again, prepare font, print, and so on. But it's pleasant part. The nightmare a nightmare for me is drawing symbols from scratch. I mentioned this, that Hebrew, for example, fortunately there are 4 Hebrew letters needed. They are used mainly in set theory for counting infinities, Aleph and Bet Gimel. And this is, I'm always very uncertain when I have to produce manually a large number of glyphs, because I'm not a typographer. So it takes a lot of time, because I have from time to time I remember, oh, you should check whether this line and this line fit together, that glyph and that glyph. typographers know it just because they know it. I have to think about it and check and make cross-checking. Anyway, I'm rather satisfied with the Pagella. To me, it resembles the original Zapf idea of the letters. Remember that they are symbols. They are not used for typesetting text, so they need not to be the grayness of the text need not to be preserved. Yeah, so making symbols is much easier than making text fonts. Yeah? So I'm aware of if the symbols were to be used as text, I would never do it. I would ask Łukasz. I would give him vodka.
Co tak patrzysz się na mnie?
No co? No bo on tobie daje potem. And here, as you can see, this is unfinished part of Bonum because it's just the same as in Termes. So double struck at the moment is taken from Termes, which doesn't change functionality of the font. You can use it, but of course I have to do it. Perhaps again this Hebrew symbols are too bold. Perhaps they need to be tuned. Anyway, this is the most difficult part and most time consuming. Surprisingly, for me it takes about a month of work, with including tests and reiterating the after correcting and observe that there are some strange things, like here you have gamma, capital, small gamma, and product. Not product, summation. Summation and not product, but pi is in the collection of symbols. Pi and summation, not sigma. In traditional TeX fonts did by Alan Jeffrey, which I'm not especially fond of them, sigma is used, not summation. Perhaps we have to correct it. I just grabbed Alan Jeffrey's fonts and used it, but maybe they need correction. For example, here you can see this mirrored A, which is for me is, I don't like it. But nobody complained ever about this letter. Anyway, this is difficult for me and takes time. And next, I would say that this is most unpleasant part of the work for me. And a lot of time we spend on tuning parameters. This I cannot say that it's unpleasant, but it takes time. Analyzing all the interrelation between parameters is really difficult to understand how they work, how they influence each other. Just an example. Roughly speaking, parameters can be divided into two parts. One of them controls the shape, and some of them control the behavior of glyphs in math formulas. Example of shape controlling parameters, I would like to show on the example of arrows. You are not supposed to read this carefully, this whole parameters, but you can see that there is a lot of parameters controlling arrows, because arrows, surprisingly for us, are variety of shapes, actually. And we start with a few parameters and then added and added and added, and moreover we used also some procedures as generalized parameters, because it's easier to modify code than to control, to change parameters controlling the code. And this still not so many. This is one page of parameters concerning only arrows is enough to produce such odd creatures like arrows in Latin modern, arrows in Bonum, arrows in Pagella, and arrows in TeX Gyre. I'm not far from. And an example of parameters controlling behavior, they are parameters that must be by definition in the OTF table, math table. Here you have an example. There are 75 of the parameters, so obligatory 75 must be. And here you have a few
57.
parameters controlling
57.
57.
7 and 50.
Okay. Sorry. A co ja powiedziałem?
75.
Because of Hebrew letters. Controlling the position of elements of fraction. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 parameters, and you can see, you will see in a moment that they are not enough to define precisely the behavior of typesetting engines. You can see here that LuaTeX sets in such a form, ZLaTeX sets in such a form, and Microsoft Word sets in such a form. What is the first difference? The baseline. We wanted that in large formulas the baseline is preserved. But ZLaTeX doesn't respect this for some reason. I do not know why. We do not know how to force Microsoft Word to use here smaller letters. There is perhaps one more parameter is needed, don't know. So here is a good example of the case why parameters are so difficult, because you are helpless. You just have such a result and you cannot help it. You can manipulate with parameters. Sometimes we can find the way around, sometimes not. And finishing the story, of course, after completing a font, we have to go through so far made font, because always something is found, always something, tiny bug or improvement or visual improvement that proliferates to all fonts. Sometimes glyphs are to be added, so they have to be added in all fonts. But this is normal routine, I would say, and this is what we expected that it will be such. And what shortly, very shortly, what about future? The future. The version is of this Bonum pre-release, of course, but for using, for testing, anybody is entitled to and encouraged to use it. I gave it to the Praesissimus, and he promised to put it on the web page. Soon should be, once I'm over with the double stack font, I want to put to release the official version. And by the end of the year, one more pending font we want to release. It's TeX Gyre Pagella Schola, the replacement for school book, which, and this will close the main part of the project TeX Gyre Math fonts. Of course, there is a lot to be done still to test, tune, visually, formally, improve the representation, add some features, and so on. Testing is done mainly by Piotr Pianowski, who writes special scripts for that, and so and always provides a lot of work. Anyway, as you can see, we are nearly ready with the project. Some tiles are to be filled. We are very grateful to our group that helped us. And thank you. And let's meet.
Gdzie te brakujące trzy fragmenty?
This is TeX Gyre Schola. They will be filled in the next lecture. Thank you.
Question time.
Ja tak do końca nie zrozumiałem. Te parametry, które wy używacie, w całości trafiają do takiego fontu OTF, czy to jakiś wybór trafia do tego fontu OTF?
Nie rozumiem.
Powiedziałeś, że w foncie OTF muszą być zawarte parametry, które decydują potem, sterują, powiedzmy, zachowanie fontu, tak?
No.
Czy te, które wy w tych metapostowych swoich programach macie?
Nie mamy jak ich przekazać. Do fontu matematycznego może przejść tylko te 57. Tak? One też częściowo są wykorzystywane w programach metapostowych, ale w programach metapostowych używamy znacznie więcej parametrów, niż potem jest przekazywane do...
No, czyli jest utrata informacji.
Jest. Translated?
The question was what's happening to the other parameters which are being used to describe shapes of the characters within the metapost programs. There are more than 57. So the answer was yes, this information is being lost when going out to and storing the OTF format. So recreating the parameters out of the OTF form in such a way as to reconstruct in metafont is impossible because information has been lost.
Yes. And
so you have to keep the sources.
Of course, and the main part, the symbols, arrows, they are programs, and in OTF files there are curves. So anyway, the information is lost.
I have a question about the sits versus termits. Is the both basically versions of times?
Yes.
Well, do you, well, why would you say you think that Terminus is a better mathematical font than Xits? Or vice versa?
Not better. Terms is more compatible with other TeX Gyre Math fonts. It's and some features are better in terms. For example, square roots. We paid a lot of attention to square roots. Some are, in some aspects, the Xits is better. For example, the repertoire of characters. So there are just two projects, and since nobody knows what happens when a few years ago we did nothing, we did know nothing about producing fonts. So making it in parallel was just collecting more experience.
Andrzej?
Nie, czepialstwo kompletne, ale pokazywałeś rosyjskie pismo, które było szwabachą, a mówiłeś o nim frakturze. O co to?
Bo tak się nazywa
Po angielsku.
Po angielsku frakturą. Taki żargon jest, tak jak czcionka i font, tak? No to
Czcionka jest po polsku.
Może jeszcze...
Jedna mała myśl. Tak mamy tu pomyślałem. Oczywiście najprawdopodobniej ona nie pasuje do samego tego wykładu, ale przykłady, że to ten sam kod w różnych kompilatorach, kontekst i tak dalej, ZTEX składa się nieco inaczej.
Mocno.
Dobra, zostawmy to nieco. Sugeruję już, że najprawdopodobniej tak pozostanie. To znaczy, że będą się pojawiały coraz częściej różnice behawioralne w zależności od tego, jakiego kompilatora używamy. Co sugeruje zapotrzebowanie dla autora na to, żeby mógł przy pomocy jakiejś metadeklaracji wskazać, jaki kompilator powinien być użyty do pracy. To jest coś podobnego jak w skryptach shellowych, czy piszesz po prostu w pierwszym metakomentarzu, czy ma być wywołany apt, czy ma być wywołany bash, czy jakaś inna powłoka. Czy to nie jest przypadkiem sygnał, że trzeba pomyśleć o takiej metanotacji, tak samo jak mam metanotację do tablicy kodowej, którą można podać na początku źródła.
Andrzej, the comment from Andrzej was that the problem seems to creep up because different engines typeset the same text in different ways. So there should be probably some way of the author to be able to say in his paper which engine should be used to typeset his paper. Right? Because much formula, we are talking about mathematics, mainly mathematics. Last one comment.
I rather think that there's something wrong with the specification of the ODF format. If the compilers authors of compilers don't know how to interpret what's
That's other thing, of course. But it always there will be different engines, there will be different implementations.
But they should comply the specification.
But I think this is not, I mean, what Andrzej suggested, I don't think this is limited to OPF or whatever. I mean, from what I understand, there are, ZTEC primitives that will break in context, and there are context primitives that are just commands that will not work in ZTEC, etc. And I'm actually surprised to hear that there is no declare in the document that this is a ZTEC document, or it's a context or a LUATEC document. I think it should be quite obvious because...
But there is a slight difference, because in old text, the behavior of math formulas was really exactly specified. I don't say that it was very ingenious, but at least it was precisely described. Now it is not more the case.
Okay, let's leave it at that. Thank you very much again.